Can a 7-times world champion like Lewis Hamilton fail flatly in his new team? Is it possible that Ferrari has signed a legend to turn it into a half-table pilot? Stay, because what is happening with Hamilton in the 2025 season is more serious than anyone imagined. Lewis Hamilton arrives at the Austria Grand Prix in the most difficult stage of his professional career, one that no one, not even himself, could foresee when he signed his millionaire and media contract with Ferrari. The expectation was clear: a heptacampion, a symbol of domain and class at the wheel, reaching Maranello to return the glory to the most iconic team in the history of Formula One. But 10 races later, the reality is brutally opposite. The pilot who used to the world to see him compete for victorias, today travels through a championship in which he has not managed to climb the podium once. It is the first time in his career a trajectory of almost 2 decades that does not add a top 3 on the first 10 dates of the calendar. The data is more than symbolic, it is historical. A Hamilton without podiums, without rhythm, without trust, and, the most painful, more and more lagging in front of your teammate. Charles Leclerc, who knows in detail the intricate secrets of the red machinery, has evidenced the British in 5 of the 6 races that both finished. The difference not only translates into points, where Leclerc almost doubles the Hamilton account, but also in sensations. While the Monegasque fights for privileged positions, Hamilton seems caught in an endless process of technical and psychological adaptation. Internal pressure is increasingly palpable. Within Ferrari, engineers dedicate excessive attention to understanding how to adapt the SF25 in the style of Hamilton, which has generated underground friction. Leclerc, Maranello's adopted son for years, has not hidden his discomfort to what he considers an unnecessary distraction of the common objective. Tensions are no longer a matter of rumors, but a palpable reality in every race weekend. The moral of the team is affected by this duality of interests: a pilot who still fails to feel comfortable and another who demands technical prominence to fight for the title. All this happens while Hamilton dealt with his own internal process. Over the years, it has demonstrated an unmatched capacity to adapt, to reinvent itself. But in 2025, that ability seems not to suffice. The pilot who once dominated the hybrid era with Mercedes now faces the constant frustration of not being able to make the car respond. What seemed to be the great final step towards a total consecration as a Ferrari legend is becoming a kind of competitive purgatory. Each race, each classification, each stint is a painful reminder that neither the most extraordinary talent can tame a machine that is simply not made for him. This is the context with which Hamilton reaches Red Bull Ring, a circuit where braking stability, tensile traction, and confidence in the rear train make a difference between competing for victory or caught in the platoon. And everything indicates that, if there is no radical technical turn, Hamilton will star in another weekend of frustrations. Because when the car and the pilot do not speak the same language, nor the records, nor the championships, nor the experience manages to translate that disconnection into real results. The promise of a competitive car, evolved from the teachings of the previous season, has crumbled from the first kilometers on the track. From the pre-season tests in Bahrain, the symptoms were evident. The rear train did not offer the required stability, the setup window was extremely narrow, and the car responded with survival at the curve entrance and subviring in the middle phase. In other words, a broken balance that punishes piloting constantly and saboting all trusted attempt. For a pilot like Hamilton, who builds his rhythm from absolute control in late branches and a precise direction with the rear of the well-planted car, the SF25 represents a frontal denial in his style. Technical data does not lie. The rear suspension, even with the latest updates, continues to show inappropriate flexions under side load, which causes unwanted aerodynamic micro-adjusts and an erratic weights transfer. This makes Hamilton not fully trust the reaction of the car at the time of attacking medium or fast curves, which forces him to constantly modify his way of driving, something that goes against his competitive DNA. The work of the engineers has been intense. Ferrari has tried multiple solutions: settings in the rake, modifications in weight distribution, changes in the stiffness of the rear axle, even specific simulator programs to try to find a minimal synergy between car and pilot. However, the problem is not just physical, it is conceptual. The SF25 was developed with a philosophy that aligns better with the sensitivity of Charles Leclerc, who tends to adopt more round trajectories, with less dependence on the rear train and greater tolerance to the movement of the posterior axle. For Hamilton, that dynamic is simply unacceptable if you want to get the best out of your driving. In this context, each Grand Prix becomes a fight not only against the rivals, but against a machine that does not cooperate. The SF25, more than an extension of its talent, is today an obstacle that blocks each Hamilton attempt to reconnect with its best version. While the rest of the grill evolves, the Hamilton-Ferrari binomial faces a cruel paradox, having one of the best pilots in history trapped in one of the most temperamental cars in paddock. And that combination for now still does not solution. In the race, the old problems reappeared. The car returned to its trust, especially in the management of the tires. The SF25 operational window closed again on itself, leaving Hamilton without tools to hold the competitive rhythm. Each stint became a containment exercise, and the team's strategy, far from enhancing what was achieved in classification, only aggravated the limitations of the technical package. In addition, the mental instability caused by a dynamic team dynamic played against him again. Charles Leclerc, annoyed with media and technical attention centered on his partner, not only responded on the track, but fed the internal narrative of a growing rivalry. In Ferrari, the atmosphere begins to resemble that of other problematic times. Two pilots with different philosophies, two faithful styles, and a structure that fails to manage that duality without eroding inside. Shanghai, which could have been a turning point, ended up being just a temporary truce. The most revealing the weekend was what Hamilton confessed once down from the car. He spoke of how difficult it has been reconnected emotionally with driving. He said he did not remember the last time he felt true satisfaction at the wheel. And although in Shanghai that seemed to return for a moment, he acknowledged that he is still far from establishing a real relationship with the car. It was a step forward, yes, but also a mirror that reflects how much it remains to go. Lewis Hamilton is not only fighting a misfit car, a partner who surpasses him, and a team in technical crisis. It is also facing a silent battle that occurs outside the paddock, outside the circuit, far from the chronometers. It is an internal, emotional battle, deep psychological wear. The type of conflict that is rarely seen from the stands, but that defines the performance of any elite athlete. And in the case of Hamilton, that emotional erosion is beginning to be noticed. After 2 decades of successes, records, and domain, Hamilton is for the first time in a situation in which his experience, his natural talent, and his competitive instinct are not enough. He has confessed to recent statements. He underestimated the time he would take to adapt to Ferrari. He thought he could accelerate the process, that his background would allow him to take a shortcut in the learning curve. But reality has hit it strongly. There are no shortcuts when the car does not respond, when engineers do not find answers, and when the environment that should enhance it ends up being a weight. External pressure has also climbed. The Italian press, known for its fierce scrutiny, has begun to question not only its performance, but its signing in general. There are headlines that accuse him of being more concerned about his public image than for his track performance. Others call it with media distraction rather than sports solution. In parallel, the British press, which has traditionally protected it, begins to wonder if this stage in Ferrari can end up being an error that binds the closure of its brilliant career. That media, constant and rough pressure inevitably filters into the pilot's mind. But perhaps the most unfortunate is the feeling of isolation within the team. Although Hamilton has reiterated his commitment to Ferrari and his intention to build something big, internal dynamics suggest something else. The tacit favoritism towards Leclerc, the lack of real technical solutions, and the accumulated frustration of not having a dominant voice in strategic decisions make Hamilton feel, sometimes, as a stranger in his own team. And that, for someone who in Mercedes was the absolute center of the technical and emotional universe of the team, represents a very hard blow. The future for now is uncertain. Although the contract is solid and the official discourse is of mutual patience, the signs suggest that if this trend does not change, Hamilton could face one of the most difficult decisions of his career. Persist in Ferrari despite the low performance, or looking for an exit before the damage is irreparable. Because it's not just about results. This is a legacy. How will it be remembered? Whether this final stage will stain or enlarge its history. What is happening with Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari in this 2025 season is not simply a story of poor results. It is a deep chapter, loaded with technical, emotional, and strategic nuances that exposes to what extent the success in Formula One depends on something more than talent. Here it is not enough to be a legend. Not even having 7 world titles. Modern F1 demands a perfect alignment between pilot, machine, equipment, and context. And today, Hamilton doesn't have that synergy. The key question that we should all ask ourselves is not if it still has speed because it demonstrated it in Shanghai, but if Ferrari has the ability to give it the necessary tools so that this speed flourish consistency. This scenario forces us to look forward with skepticism, but also with a dose of expectation. Because if there is someone who has challenged narratives throughout his career, he has been Lewis Hamilton. He did it in his debut facing Fernando Alonso. He did it in 2008 winning a title under pressure. He did it in Mercedes reinventing himself in the hybrid era. Could it do it now, at the decline of your career, from the most raw and exposed adversity to the most fierce criticisms? That is the true story that is being written. Not if you can win races, but if you can reinvent yourself once again from the abyss. And now it's your turn. Do you think Hamilton will reverse the situation in the remainder of the championship? Or are we attending live and direct to the final decline of one of the greats of all time?